So I've gotten a ton of views and a lot of feedback on this image, and I've had some people asking what was the processing method. Right here you'll see the before and after in Lightroom. On the left is the out of the camera, and the right is what I did in Lightroom itself. So basically what I'm looking at is the background and the dust is darker, more texture, more contrast, and the subject, which is the darkest thing out of the camera, I want to lighten up and make them more contrasty. Basically, you can see from the sliders, I bumped the contrast, pull the white level up just to give it that extra punch. Even though I pushed the whites up, you can see it's still not pushed too high, making sure that I still have plenty of detail in the little highlights of the dust and the white plastic. I'm going to go ahead and show the different adjustment selections that I did. The dirt basically was one big adjustment. It's just basically the clarity turned up. You can see that's all I did to that section. And then specifically the dirt on the ground, bumped the highlights a little bit, and then also bumped the exposure just to punch it up a little bit. And we've got two different selections on the rider. One is all the outside highlight points where the sun was the most harsh, and that's where I pulled the exposure and the highlights down to try to recover as much as I could to balance that out. And then the one on the inside is basically all the rider itself as one, so that way I could balance out the whole subject as one. And you can see I bumped the contrast, bumped the shadows and the clarity, so that gave me more shadow detail while still preserving contrast, and then the clarity was just to sharpen him up, make it a little punchier. And then on the tire specifically down here, you'll see I went through and did some of the darker sections only in this selection. You know, basically I was getting the shadows up, I was pulling as much detail as I could out so that I could later balance it. That's pretty much all I did in Lightroom. We'll see in the final. And this is kind of the tricky part. This is kind of the secret sauce that I've started adding to some of my pictures. I've started taking effects and making basically a dodge and burn layer out of a silver effect preset. So basically what happens is I'm going to come out with a gray layer with tones higher and lower that are natural to the image, and I'm going to use a blending mode to merge that with the image to basically make it a little bit more like a painting than real life. Okay, so we've got all kind of different options here. I basically just go through these and look for the one that has the effect I'm looking for. That actually looks really cool, just like that. Wet rocks. I think this is the one I use, the wet rocks, and this is NIK Silver Effects 2. Real quick, there's no specific science to this that I've come up with, but basically you can go through and balance the image out. Keep in mind this will be a blending mode layer, so it's not going to look just like this. Basically how this looks is going to affect the color image. So if it's really dark here, like way darker than it is in the color version, it's going to affect it in that way. In the opposite sense, if it's a shadow and it's really bright, it will pull some of that detail out of the shadows. Just for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead with it just like it is. Okay, so now that we have the silver effects layer on top of the color layer, I can go ahead and turn it on and we can play with the different blending modes. I usually start with luminosity for something like this. As you can see, that looks pretty grungy, and we can go ahead and pull it back. And I usually end up somewhere 30 to 50. That's usually kind of the sweet spot. Alright, so there is, what is that, 39, just by eyeballing it. And then we can turn it off and on. We can zoom in a little bit and show you the difference. He's pretty sharp. And then it adds just an extra layer of texture and grittiness. When you get up close, it gets pretty grainy, but from back here it doesn't affect it. So yeah, that's the Silver Effects Pro, using it as a blending layer.